Getting addicted to studying is easy, actually. Everyone tells you discipline is hard. That motivation fades. That you have to force yourself to sit down and grind through the material. But what if that's not entirely true? What if, for a certain kind of person, studying doesn't feel like discipline at all? It feels like relief. Have you ever noticed that some people don't need to be pushed to study? They don't wait for motivation. They don't need a countdown to an exam. Something else is happening in their mind. And if you've ever caught yourself craving a textbook the way other people crave a scroll through their phone, you already know what I'm talking about. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Psychologists have found that learning activates the same reward circuitry as other habits we call addictive. The difference is simply what it's attached to. Studying can become a genuine psychological hook, not because you're unusually disciplined, but because your mind has quietly rewired what it finds comforting. And by the end of this video, you'll understand the real reason some people fall into this pattern, and why it might be less about intelligence, and more about something happening underneath the surface, something most people never notice until it's already changed them. The first reason is control. At first, studying feels like just another task on a list, something to check off between other obligations. But then something shifts. You start noticing that when the rest of your life feels unpredictable, the material in front of you never does. A concept either makes sense or it doesn't. A problem either resolves or it doesn't. And slowly, you begin gravitating toward that certainty. You start reading one more chapter before bed, not because it's due, but because it settles something in you. You find yourself organizing notes at midnight, not for a grade, but because the structure feels good in your hands. You notice you'd rather review a difficult subject than sit with an unresolved conversation. You catch yourself feeling calmer with a textbook open than with your phone open. None of this is really about the grade anymore. It's not because you're chasing achievement, but because you're chasing order. In a world that often feels chaotic, studying becomes one of the only places where effort reliably produces a result. The psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi described this as a flow state, a mental space where challenge and skill align so precisely that time seems to disappear. Once you've felt that alignment, you go looking for it again and again. But here's where it gets more surprising. The second reason runs even deeper than control. It's identity. At first, you study to learn something. But then, without quite noticing the shift, you start to study to become someone. You begin noticing that each new concept you master feels like evidence, proof that you are someone capable, someone growing, someone becoming more than you were last week. You start associating your worth with your ability to understand things. You feel a quiet pride finishing a dense chapter that has nothing to do with anyone else knowing you did it. You notice you'd rather understand something fully than move on quickly. You feel oddly proud explaining a concept to someone else, even when no one asked. You keep a mental tally of everything you've learned this month, almost like a private scoreboard. You feel unsettled on days you don't learn anything new at all. This isn't vanity. It's not because you want to look smart, but because understanding has become how you prove to yourself that you're still growing. Modern psychology suggests that this need, competence, the feeling of increasing mastery, is one of the core psychological needs that drives sustained human motivation. Once studying starts feeding that need, it stops feeling like work. It starts feeling like identity maintenance. The third reason is escape, though not in the way people usually mean it. At first, studying seems like the opposite of avoidance. It looks responsible. It looks admirable. But then you notice something quieter underneath it. The hours you spend studying are also the hours you don't have to face something else. A decision you're avoiding, a relationship you haven't sorted out, a version of your future you're not ready to look at directly. You notice you study hardest during the weeks your personal life feels most unclear. You notice you'll organize your notes for an hour rather than answer a text that unsettles you. You notice studying feels productive in a way that makes it easy to justify avoiding everything else. You notice a strange comfort in problems that have a definite answer, when so much of life doesn't. This is the biggest misunderstanding people carry about this pattern. They assume that if studying is productive, it can't also be avoidance. But productivity and avoidance are not opposites. Sometimes they're the same behavior wearing a more acceptable mask. Not because you're lazy or in denial, but because your mind found a productive shelter, and shelters are hard to leave once you're inside them. The fourth reason is quieter still, and it has to do with solitude. Somewhere in this process, You stop needing an audience. You stop needing someone to witness your effort for it to feel worthwhile. You begin to notice that the hours spent alone with a subject start to feel less like isolation and more like companionship. You and the material, working something out together. Your sense of self starts to shift. It stops depending on being seen and starts depending on what you privately know you understand. This is a subtle kind of self-respect, one that doesn't ask for applause. And once that shift happens, you start to sense that the real question was never about study habits at all. It was about something you were quietly building this whole time, something that's about to become clear. Here is the final truth. Getting addicted to studying was never really about the subject. It was about finding one corner of your life where effort and outcome still made sense, and holding on to it like a rope in the dark. So ask yourself honestly, are you running away from something you haven't faced yet? Or are you finally walking toward the person you're trying to become? Both can be true at once. That's what makes this pattern so human and so easy to misread, even in yourself. Sometimes the things that look like discipline are actually just desperation wearing better clothes. And sometimes they're the first real evidence of growth. The difference isn't in the hours you put in, it's in what you're quietly running from or quietly running toward. If this kind of psychology breakdown helped you understand your own habits a little better, consider subscribing. There's more of this coming, unpacking the hidden reasons behind the things we do without realizing why. And before you go, tell me in the comments, when you study, are you chasing calm, chasing growth, or avoiding something else entirely? I genuinely like to know. Keep questioning, keep growing.